Resourceful Designer, episode 309, a look back, a look ahead, 2022 edition.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He was the first in his group of friends who could grow a mustache, Mark DeCote.
This is true, although maybe I do use the term mustache a little loosely here. You see, I have black hair, so the little fuzz that appeared on my lip was much more visible than, let's say, my fair-haired friends. So it just made it look like I had a mustache much earlier than everyone else. But by an adult standards, I don't know if you really want to call it a mustache, but it was noticeable, so I say it counts. Anyway, in this episode, which is the last episode of the year, I'm sharing what I started several years ago, and that is my look back, my look ahead. It's where I share a little bit of the year that's happened for me. I give you some numbers, I tell you some of my accomplishments, some of my failures, and I look ahead at what goals I'm setting for myself in 2023. This is always a fun episode, give you a little bit of perspective about my life, and hopefully make you think about where you've been and where you're going. Now, speaking of where you're going, I hope that you're going to order your custom stickers from Sticker Mule. Yep, they're offering a special deal right now to listeners of Resourceful Designer where you can get 10 custom stickers for only $1 and free shipping. So all you pay is $1 and you get 10 stickers. Now that's a crazy deal not to take advantage of. And all you have to do is visit stickermule.com/resourceful designer. And it doesn't matter if you've used one of these deals before. If you have not used the Resourceful Designer deal, you are entitled to it. So even if you're already a Sticker Mule member, if you've used another deal that they've offered in the past, you can still take advantage of this one. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Sticker Mule, they offer top-notch, high-quality products, including the stickers, which are their namesake. I mean, they're called Sticker Mule. And let me tell you, I am super impressed with the quality of the products that I've received from them. I've had several orders in the past made and sent directly to clients, and I had never seen them before. So I'd never held one in my hands. Until just recently, I ordered some for myself, and I was super impressed with the quality. These are a very nice vinyl sticker. They're very durable. They're good for indoors and outdoors, which is great. So you can stick them on, say, the back. I've got one on the back of my car. I have a Resourceful Designer sticker, and I stuck it on the back of my car. It's very small. It's not like a big bumper sticker, but it looks great. And I don't have to worry about it fading in the sun or the rain or weather possibly damaging it. I love Sticker Mule. I've recommended them to many other people. I have some clients who have ordered stuff from them. I've recommended them in the Resourceful Designer community. And now I'm recommending them to you. Yes, they are sponsoring this episode, and I'm grateful for that. But I would not have them as a sponsor here at Resourceful Designer if I did not believe in their product, which I do 100%. And that's why I'm thrilled that they're offering this special deal for you. If you're not familiar with them, this is the perfect opportunity to find out just what sort of quality they offer. And for only $1, you can get 10 custom stickers made. All you have to do is visit stickermule.com/resourceful designer. It's as easy as that. Thank you, Sticker Mule, for sponsoring the podcast. And now, a look back, a look ahead, 2022 edition. Now, first of all, I just want to thank you as a listener of Resourceful Designer. You have no idea how much I appreciate the fact that you are listening right now, that you take some of your precious time to listen to what I have to say. There are so many great resources that you could be consuming, reading articles, watching videos, other podcasts, so many other things that you could be consuming in order to become a better designer, a better business owner, and all of that. And the fact that you chose to listen to me is humbling. And I want to thank you for that. Now, as I mentioned in my intro, I am continuing my annual tradition where the last podcast episode of the year is my Look Back, Look Ahead edition. It's where I reflect and share my year as a design business owner. Then I'll look ahead at what I want to accomplish next year in 2023. So let's start off by looking at the goals that I had actually set for myself this year. At the end of 2021, I set the following goals, and I'm going to go through them and list whether I accomplished them or I failed at them. So the first goal I'd set was to talk at more conferences. Now I can say right off the bat, I failed at this because I didn't speak at any conferences this year. Yeah, I had set this goal figuring, the pandemic was coming to an end and I would get more chances to get out, but I ended up choosing not to travel in 2022. I skipped all the conferences I normally go to and stayed home. It was just a choice that I made that I wasn't going to travel in 2022. We'll see what 2023 brings, but 2022, I didn't go anywhere, so I wasn't able to talk. Now, I was asked to be at a few, but I wasn't able to make it. I was also asked to speak at some virtual conferences, but I turned those down because I've done that before, speaking at virtual conferences, and I found that all the effort that goes into creating a presentation, practicing it, making sure you got it all down pat and that, it's a lot of effort for a virtual conference because I found the returns are just not that great. So I decided not to speak at any of them. So I did fail at this one, but this was of my own volition, which in my mind means it's not so bad. Now, my next goal was to grow the Resourceful Designer podcast audience. And this one here is a little strange. I can't really say that I accomplished it, but I can't also say that I failed at it. So I'm going to call this one an even. You see, ever since the pandemic hit, my podcast listenership has dropped. But I'm not alone at this. I've talked to other podcasters and everybody says the same thing. Starting in 2020, their numbers have dropped compared to pre-pandemic. Now, they are slowly going back up, but I don't have the same download numbers as I did beforehand. At least not the download numbers per episode. And that's the funny thing. I'm getting fewer downloads per episode, but overall, I'm getting more downloads in total. And that's why I'm saying that this one is kind of even. Now, what I attribute that to is possibly some of the older listeners, people who had been listening for a while, giving up and stopping the podcast, no longer subscribing to the podcast. While new listeners who are just discovering the podcast, hello, by the way, if that's you, new listeners are probably downloading multiple episodes of the podcast. So instead of just the most recent one, they're going back through the catalog and listening to multiple episodes, if not all of them. A few people have told me they've listened to all 300 plus episodes, which I always reply, wow, that's a lot of mark to listen to. So even though the per episode download numbers are going down or are below what they used to be, the overall download numbers have been going up. So that's why I said this goal was kind of even. Now, what I did accomplish was growing the Resourceful Designer community. Not as much as I would have hoped, but it did go up compared to the previous year. Now, the community, I have to say, is my pride and joy. One day when I'm no longer doing this podcast and maybe I'm no longer running a design business because I'm retired, I'll look back at everything I've done and I know that the Resourceful Designer community will be one of my proudest accomplishments. Not just for what it brings to me, but just for the friendships that have formed within. Just this past year, a group of community members got together live. They formed their own retreat. They rented an Airbnb and all got together for a few days to talk about design and their business. Now, I wasn't able to attend that, and I was so heart-stricken that I wasn't able to, but I'm looking forward to next year where they're talking about doing it again. And these are all people that came together through the Resourceful Designer community and have formed these friendships, these bonds. And I know that some of these friendships will last a lifetime. And to me, that makes the whole endeavor that I did worth it. So regardless of what the future holds for me and my business, I'll always be proud of the Resourceful Designer community that I built. Now, if you're not sure what the community is and you want to learn more, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community, where you can read about it and join. Now, another goal I had was to do more consulting work. And this one I did accomplish. I had several clients pay for my consulting services, both inside and outside the podcast space. Now, I did add a podcast brand audit as a service for podcast branding, where I go through 40 different points of their podcast, their website, and their whole marketing and branding strategy. And I had several people take me up on this. And what's great about it is once I point out all the improvements, many of them then hired me to make those improvements for them. So it was a win-win. So that one was an accomplishment. And my last goal that I had was to grow podcast branding, my secondary business, or I say secondary, but I'll get to that in a moment. And this one I also accomplished. Podcast branding, which I launched in 2019, was just supposed to be an offshoot of my regular design business. It was going to be something I would just do on the side while I'm running Marksman Design, my regular business. But in the past 3 years, everything has shifted, and podcast branding has now become my main design business. I'm earning more money through it than I ever did with Marksman Design. And it's taking a lot less effort for me to get new clients. So what started as a fun whim to start this thing is paying itself off tenfold. And I love it. So those were my goals that I had set out, and the ones I accomplished and the ones that I failed. Now I want to share some numbers from 2022, and I'll start off with the podcast. For Resourceful Designer, I released 30 episodes, including this one, of the podcast, which is the lowest number of episodes I've ever released in a calendar year. Which I was a little disappointed when I looked back at the numbers and realized, wow, I've only released 30 episodes? That was a little disappointing. Now, I can attribute this to just being very busy this past year. There were several weeks where I wasn't able, I just couldn't get around to doing the podcast. I record one episode per week. I don't batch any of these things. So every week I put some time aside to do the podcast, and there were some weeks where I just couldn't do it. And podcast branding, my business, was one of the reasons for that. I had a lot of work to do for podcast branding, which interfered with me putting out the podcast. But with that said, I did reach over 710,000 total episode downloads in 2022. Now that's 80,000 more than the previous year. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's an increase. Now, Resourceful Designer was released on some new platforms in various countries around the world. So this year it got released on platforms Ghana, Boomplay, Deezer, JioSaavn, and Rezo. And Resourceful Designer has listeners in 120 countries around the world. And considering that there's only 195 countries around the world, I think I'm doing pretty good. It's good averages. Now let's look at my design businesses. Now my main business, or what used to be my main business, Marksman Design. Now for this one, I didn't actively promote Marksman Design in 2022. Instead, I concentrated on growing podcast branding, as I mentioned. So I continued working with existing clients, but I made no effort whatsoever to attract new clients. So for this business, I worked on 43 different design projects for 22 different clients. And that's actually one fewer client than I worked with in 2021. Now, even though I did not actively promote it in any way, I did gain one new client, and that just ended up being the wife of an existing client. She started her own business and she approached me, and it was funny. Her husband told me, he says, I don't want anything to do with this. She's your new client. You invoice her, you deal with her, and you deal with me separately. So it's like, okay, no problem. So I did get one new client that way, and I did lose one longtime client due to closure. They tried to sell their business. They weren't able to. They were retiring. And eventually they just shut down. So I lost them as a client. Now, with all those projects and clients, I sent out a total of 27 invoices through Marksman Design in 2022, which was down from the previous year when I had sent out 41 invoices. But even though I sent out fewer invoices, I actually billed for more money in 2022 than I did for 2021. So even though I didn't grow that business, I gained one client, lost one client. So I was pretty well even client-wise. And I did fewer projects than I had the previous year. Those projects were more lucrative and I earned more money. So that's a good thing. Now, with podcast branding, as I said earlier, it's now become my main business. It's the moneymaker for me. I worked on 66 different projects for 47 different clients, which is funny. It's actually more projects than the previous year, but for fewer clients, which means that clients were either ordering multiple things, like multiple projects for me to do at a time, or they were coming back to me to do other projects once I had finished the initial one. So I worked on 66 different projects for 47 different clients, and my revenue increased 27% compared to 2021. So that was great. And that was mostly due to me doing more websites for clients, and websites are more lucrative than doing, say, podcast artwork. So I did launch 12 new websites for clients, which is up. The previous year, I'd only done 9 websites. So I did 12 new websites, which was, averages out to 1 per month. And honestly, it felt like I was doing a lot more. It was kind of funny. I looked back, and when I got that number, I said, I'm sure I did more than 12. But looking back, no, I worked on 12 websites. That's not counting some websites that I kind of updated and did some work on other ones. I'm talking about brand new websites here. So there were some clients where I was doing some work on an existing website, and maybe that's why it felt like more. Now, an interesting thing is I appeared as a guest on 3 different podcasts during the year to discuss podcast artwork and websites and branding and all that stuff. And those brought me a lot of exposure. I get a lot of new clients coming into me saying they'd heard me on those podcasts. And what's interesting is even though this business, podcast branding, is geared 100% towards podcasters in the podcast space, I've had several people who are podcasters contact me to do projects that were not podcast related. I've done one website for somebody that has a course. They have a podcast, but they didn't want me to do anything about their podcasts or that side of the business. They have another business and they wanted me to work on that. Similar to something else, there's another gentleman who was starting a podcast but didn't want my help. He was going to do something for himself for a website, but he wanted a website for some other part of his business. Just like I had a logo design for somebody that is a podcaster, but he contacted me because his wife was starting a business. And no, this is not the same couple that I was talking about before, but his wife was starting a business that had nothing to do with podcasting. And he asked me if I would be willing to do a logo for him. And I did. So it's funny that even though this business is geared specifically for the podcast niche, I'm still getting work from it that's not in the podcast niche. And I've talked about this sort of stuff in past episodes where I've talked about niching. And that's, it's one of the concerns that a lot of people have whenever they talk about a niche. It's like, well, I don't want to be pigeonholed into doing one thing. Well, you're not. Just because you specialize in one thing doesn't mean you can't do these other things. And this is proof. I have a website that is dedicated 100% towards podcasters, and yet I'm still getting work from that website that has nothing to do with podcasting. So even if you do niche down on something, or niche, depending on how you want to say it, even if you do, that doesn't mean you're isolating yourself to only that one thing. It just means that you're going to be viewed as an expert in that one field, which can only benefit you. So those were the numbers for 2022. So now I want to share some of the goals that I'm setting for myself for next year. Now, many of the goals that I had in the past will just continue. I still want to grow a Resourceful Designer community. I want to concentrate more on podcast branding and so forth. So those goals will probably carry forward. But I have some new goals that I want to set for 2023. The first one is I want to create some new partnerships to help grow what I offer at Podcast Branding. There are a few services that I think could really benefit my clients, but it's not really something that I want to do. So I'm looking for some partners to do certain things in. I have some ideas. I'm not going to go into them on this podcast, but I do have some ideas that I'm going to look into. I also want to keep expanding the Resourceful Designer community. I mentioned that, but what I want to do is offer more things to community members. We're currently in the process of beta testing what we call our weekly accountability group, and I already have several people who have shown an interest in it. So come the new year, possibly in January, we're going to be launching that as a regular feature in the community that anybody who wants to be part of a weekly accountability group will be able to join one. And all that entails is joining on a quick call once per week with somebody just to talk and set a goal. And it could be a simple goal that you want to do, like update a page on your website or contact an old client you haven't heard from in a while. They could be simple goals, but it's the accountability of it. If you say you're going to do it, then by the time the next meeting rolls around, you don't want to say, oh, well, I didn't actually do it. So it kind of encourages you to get it done. And those that are beta testing the accountability group love it and say that it's been a huge help for their business. So I'm really excited to be offering this service to the rest of the community in 2023. And we'll see what else we can come up with for the community to make it more valuable. Now, another goal that I have is to do more consulting work. As I mentioned earlier, I love the consulting. It's been a lot of fun. I'd like to do some more of that. The other thing I want to do is I want to explore video. I've been doing this podcast for many years, and over time, I've been picking up some equipment, some lights, and different things, and I think I'm ready to start doing video as a content platform for both Resourceful Designer and possibly even for podcast branding to do some stuff over video. So we'll see how that goes, but if and when I do launch something, or forget the if, when I do launch something, I'll let you know on the podcast so you can check it out. But I'm going to dip my toe into the video world. And lastly, I want to increase the number of website clients I have on my website maintenance plan. I mentioned how I had a 27% increase in revenue through podcast branding. A lot of that is attributed to clients on my web maintenance plan. Web maintenance plan, which I've talked about before on the podcast, are great. They're easy recurring revenue. It creates what you call a residual income, meaning you're making money for doing very, very little work. And every client that gets added on to the plan just means more money coming in on a monthly basis. So that's another goal, is just to convince more and more clients to join my website maintenance plan. And to do so, I've even in this past year, there's a couple of clients that didn't have a huge budget. So I offered them a little bit of a discount on designing a website for them on the condition that they join my monthly website maintenance plan. And they were okay with that. So I offered them a good deal to build the initial website, knowing that they are now going to be paying me a monthly fee on an ongoing basis. So it was a win-win for both of us. So those are some of the goals that I want to set for myself in 2023. Now, what about you? What did you accomplish goal-wise in 2022? And what are your goals for the new year? Maybe you're a student and you're getting ready to graduate this year, and that's very exciting. What are your goals once school is over? What do you plan on doing? Or maybe you're still relatively new to this whole design world. What are your goals going to be for honing your skills, becoming better, gaining that expertise? Maybe you're a veteran designer like I am and have been in this for a long time. Well, what are your goals for continuing to grow? Because no matter how long you've been doing this and how good you are at it, you got to continue growing or else you're going to fall behind. So what goals are you setting for yourself to continue that growth? Maybe you're a designer working for some other company. Maybe you enjoy that job. Maybe you don't. Either way, what are your goals for the future? Or perhaps you're already a home-based designer, a freelancer if you want to use that term, although I don't like it. What goals do you have to grow your design business? Wherever you are in the world, whatever skill level you're at, whatever your situation, I want you to take some time. Look back. Think about 2022, this year that's ending. Think about everything you've accomplished. As well, think about all the shortcomings, all the things you failed upon or things you didn't get to that you wanted to. And ponder all these things. Did you stop after your accomplishments? Or did you plow through them, happy with yourself, but reaching even further to get higher than you were before? And what about your shortcomings? Did they discourage you, make you slow down or stop? Or did they create a sense of wanting even higher than before? Think about the goals you failed at. What prevented you from reaching them? So as 2022 comes to an end, I encourage you to reflect. Think about everything you've learned, your struggles, the things you fell short on, be it by your fault or maybe it's just the state of the world as it is. We know that the recession they're talking about and prices are skyrocketing and it's tough. So think about those struggles and, of course, think about your accomplishments. Put it all together and then come up with a plan for 2023. I once heard a saying that it's easier to know where you're going if you know where you've been. Well, this applies to growing your design business. Knowing and reflecting on where you came from will help you get to where you want to be. Now, if you want my help with that, then go back and listen to episode 55 of the podcast, which was setting goals for your design business. These past few years have been tough on all of us. I hope that we never have to endure anything like the pandemic again. But there's always going to be obstacles in the future. And you know what? It's just like that old saying, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. So take what you learned in these past few years, these lessons, and use it all to make 2023 and future years even better. Now, before I go, I just want to remind you one more time of the Sticker Mule offer. You can get 10 free stickers for only $1 in free shipping by visiting stickermule.com/resourcefuldesigner. So why don't you go right now, place your order before you forget. And if you're looking to start off 2023 strong and you're looking for a great community of people to help you be accountable or just people to talk to and bounce ideas off of, why not consider joining the Resourceful Designer community at resourcefuldesigner.com/community. Now, I'll be back in 2023 with more advice for starting and growing your design business. Until then, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas, if that's the sort of thing that you celebrate, or just a wonderful holiday season, if you don't. And of course, no matter where you are in the world, and whatever goals you set for yourself in the new year, always remember to stay creative. I'm Mark Decote, wishing you all the best. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.